Hi everyone. Today we're going to be going over this riff that I just went through. It's a lesson in a chromatic line going through a popular chord progression. In this case it's a 1-4-1 progression that the chromatic line is going through. But then I put a 5-1 at the end. The key that this riff was written in was in D, and the basic chord structure is a D chord, going to a G chord, back to a D chord, and then at the end I just put an A7 and a D. Okay? So, this first line up here, well, let's start with the chromatic line. The chromatic line is happening on the 3rd string, and it's just moving all the way down to here. Chromatic means just one step at a time, or 1/2 step at a time. So we just go down 1 fret each time, so it goes. And chromatic lines are very nice. They're very pleasing to the ear, and your average listener can follow it because it just goes in a linear way. So it has a beautiful flow to it. All music is tension and resolve. And what we're going to see when we go through these chords is that this chromatic line, even though we're just using very simple chords 1, 4, and 1, it creates a beautiful flow of tension traveling to each one. So let's start with the first shape. This is our D chord, D major. I like making these little efficient shapes down on the skinny strings. Okay, and what this chord is being made from this popular D bar chord. Okay, and if we're going to use the caged system, that would be the A shape. So it's really derived from this A chord, and we just scoot it all the way up to the D. Okay, but you know, this line that I made here would be good with other instruments going on too. And rather than playing these big chords, which is fine too, I like to just use these little guys. And as you can see, it also freed up my pinky to play around. Okay, so this first one, that's just our D major. This note here, the first note in our chromatic line, is just it's a D, it's a root. Okay, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or back to 1. Okay, so when we move it down 1/2 step, it becomes the natural 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so when we go from here and we scoot our second finger down, now we have a D major 7 chord. And that's a very pretty chord. Here's a D, here's the D major 7, or there's also a D major 7. There's a D major 7 up here too. It's a very dreamy chord. Not a lot of tension yet, okay? But when we move it 1/2 step down again, now we can really hear the tension. Okay, but this note, it doesn't belong in the key of D, really. Or at least it doesn't belong in the D major scale. Okay, it's a flat 7, or we can also call it a dominant 7. And basically it's a flat 7. You know, we have the 6 here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Here's the natural 7. If we flat it, we get this D7. Okay, and the reason why this D7 works so well is 1, we have the chromatic line. Okay, but we also creating a nice line to go to this G chord, okay? And if we pretend for a second that we're not in the key of D, and we make the G the root chord, or the tonic, okay, or we pretend we're in the key of G for a second, what is the fifth of the G chord? It's a D. If we started on the G and went up the G major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we get a D, okay? And so D7 causes tension, and it gets resolved by a G major chord, okay? So even though we're in the key of D for this riff, and the G in this riff is acting as the 4 chord, we can temporarily think of it as the 1 chord. And the D then becomes, instead of the 1 chord, becomes the 5. So really, a 1 to 4 is the same as a 5 to 1. Got that? Okay, so that's why this note works. It's because even though it causes tension's okay as long as we resolve it at some point. All right, and that one works so well because the tension and the resolve comes from just, again, another half step. So after this D, we got the D major 7, we got the D7, and now our chromatic line moves us down, and now we're at the G chord. And I'm still hitting this D. You know, if we play a G chord, there's still a D in there, so I just kind of have the D as the bass. It's this nice kind of drony sound going through the riff, okay? And so what's this note now? This note is acting as the 3rd in the G chord, okay? So we have 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, okay? And this little shape here that I'm making is coming from this shape, which some of you probably know as the F shape. Or if we're thinking of the caged system, it's coming from this bar chord shape, which is the E shape for the G chord, but we slide it up to the G. But again, instead of using these big boxy chords, we can just make this little guy. And it frees up our fingers to play around, okay? Now if we keep this chromatic line going, it moves down one more. Okay, now it's a G minor chord, because this was the 3rd. We flatted the 3rd. Or in other words, okay, here's our G minor. And then we go back to the D. And why do we get this note? Why does that one work so well? Because whenever we have a 4 chord going back to a 1 chord, in this case the G going back to the D, you can make the G chord or the 4 chord go from major to minor. And again, it creates tension. And that's because chromatic lines just sound good, okay? And again, it creates a little bit of tension, and then it resolves nicely at the D. After that, I just did an A7 in the D. So let's go through this again. We have the D with the root, D with a major 7, a D with a dominant 7, a G with our 3rd, a G minor with the flat 3rd, then we're back at the D. And I didn't say, but this, now when we're back at the D, this note here is the 5th of the D. And we used very nice notes for the walk down. You know, roots, 3rds, 5ths, and 7ths, or flat 7s, or 3rds and flat 3rds. They're all very defining notes while we're in the chord. You know, most chords are made out of roots, 3rds, and 5ths. Then you have your 7ths. usually all the other notes are added for color, altered chords, sixth chords, that kind of thing. Although I was adding a lot of those when I was playing around, so I'm going to have tabbed out for you the basic chords, and I'll kind of show you how I was playing around with them, and I'll let you figure out your own ways to play with it too. So the first one, the D, we're in the D major scale, so we have, so we can play with this one, or even up way up here. Same thing with this is still in the D major scale. Now when we get to the D7, now we get this note, which is an octave higher of our chromatic line note, which is a D, or which is the dominant 7. Then we get back to the G. We get this guy to play with. We could also go way up here. But when we get to this minor one, because this was the third in the other chord, but now, or in the major chord, but now it's a flat third. Again, it's an octave. So from the major, pretty. Then we're back at the D. Okay, that's going to be it today. I'm going to encourage you to try to find your own chromatic lines through simple chord progressions. Let me know if you have any questions, and good luck to you guys.